Let us move on. Right, let us come to 10-minute rule bill. Rupert Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to prohibit quantitative easing, to prohibit the government from indemnifying any losses that may result from quantitative easing, and for connected purposes. The purpose of this draft legislation is to ensure that the state is as economically accountable to the people as the people are to the state. To do this means terminating the state's ability to debase the value of money through practices such as quantitative easing, which are not an option for the individual. Clipping, sweating, plugging and cutting are forms of coin debasement either by government or by individuals. The most famous modern UK example was the Great Debasement between 1544 and 1551, when Henry VIII reduced the gold and silver content of coinage by use of base metals such as copper in order to fund his bacchanalian overspending and wars with France. It has been a common feature of government behaviour over the 5,000 years of trading history of gold and continues today in the form of quantitative easing. With no gold standard to constrain unproductive investment and direct capital to sound and profitable investment ventures, policymakers have today become obsessed with short-term stimuli centred on the performance of stock and bond markets. Central banks have become uncontrolled, unconstrained and reckless in their pursuit of delivering non-stop, unsustainable global growth driven by credit. QE is what third world dictators used to indulge in shortly before their currencies descended into chaos, but has now become a mainstream tool to avoid the Darwinian reality of capitalism. History is littered with examples of governments, dictators and kings abusing their hard-working citizens. The Roman coinage in their ascendant years was bolder, larger and widely accepted, but reduced in size, weight and content as her empire waned. John Law's Mississippi scheme in France in 1716 to 1720, when he and the Duke of Orleans, who was regent for Louis XV, presided over an establishment-backed scheme on the premise that paper money was preferable to gold or a metal-backed currency, and shares were a superior form of money as they paid dividends. It was, in essence, the first national central bank. It ended in chaotic collapse and badly damaged France and her economy. National debt was supported by printed money in the same way as today through QE via central banks globally. I fear the ending will be the same in due course. In Weimar Germany after the First World War, the Reichsbank had become accustomed to printing money to fund the wartime economy, increasing marks in circulation from 2 billion to 45 billion between 1914 and 1919. State debt rose 30 times, from 5 billion marks to 153 billion marks. This continued with the value of the mark going into freefall in early 1923 and the issuance of notes of up to 100 trillion marks before cents returned. It was a time of moral decline, short-termism, prostitution, benefiting the opportunists, not the long-term wealth creators. With currency devaluation came a decline in all that had previously been cherished, including loyalty and faith, morals, innocence and honour. Over recent times, capitalism in the UK and globally has been undermined as states have grown in size and central banks have distorted logic. Systemic risk management in the 70s via the clearing banks was gradually replaced by more overt interventions in 1987 by Alan Greenspan and again in 1997 when long-term capital management, an offshore company, was bailed out by the US government. 2008 was a watershed moment when Gordon Brown bailed out financial institutions with an estimated cost to taxpayers of £137 billion. This was followed by quantitative easing between March 2009 and August 2016. This was dwarfed by the actions of Hank Paulson and Ben Bernanke in the US in 2008, when they used 700 billion of intervention to prop up the financial system generally and AIG in particular. During the COVID crisis of 2020 and 21, when many bad decisions were taken by an already bloated state, between 310 billion and 410 billion pounds, equivalent to between £4,600 and £6,100 per person in the UK, was spent in a number of questionable centrally planned interventions. In rather the same way as early Weimar Germany, Britain finds itself heavily indebted and continuing to run multiple deficits, making matters progressively worse. Our moral decline is clearly evident as true capitalism has been undermined by regular intervention, increasing state regulation and the growing bloated and inefficient state. It is interesting that Weimar Germany's revival started with the dismissal of many civil servants, and social welfare spending was massively cut. The French government's recent funding crisis makes it look even more like a national Ponzi scheme than in the UK. Both wings of French politics refuse to sanction debt reduction, despite the budget deficit being expected to rise to over 113% of GDP by this year. Market concerns are pushing the euro lower and France's borrowing costs higher, with bond yields briefly surpassing Spain's for the first time since 2008. Javier Milei, Argentina's president since 2023, has brought significant economic reforms with his radical libertarian agenda, earning both praise and criticism. Milei's focus has been on cutting public sector spending, reducing inflation and implementing drastic fiscal adjustments, which have led to improvement in Argentina's economy. Inflation has fallen from nearly 300% to around 119%. Public sector jobs have been reduced by 35,000, and the country has achieved a primary surplus. Argentina's economy has also exited recession with a growth rate of 3.9%, and borrowing costs have dropped, signalling reduced debt default risks. Elon Musk has been appointed to lead Donald Trump's new Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, which he will co-run with Trump ally and entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy. Musk said the department's creation would address government waste and inefficiency. Trump described DOGE as a transformative initiative, likening it to the Manhattan Project, aimed at slashing bureaucracy, cutting regulations and restructuring federal agencies. Money is the foundation of all human exchange of enterprise and replaced barter in the earliest communities. It allows for the transfer of skills through a transferable medium such as a coin, a note, or indeed a transfer. By a continuous process of inflation, however perpetrated, governments can confiscate, secretly and unobserved, an important part of the wealth of their citizens. In doing so, the size of the state inevitably grows and becomes a self-serving, greedy master of the people they should be serving. Common sense, logic, and human relationships among working people are inevitably undermined, and there is a general moral decline in society. Taxes should be transparent, justifiable, and simple. The cost of government should be covered by taxes alone, which limits the growth of excessive statism. Gold has historically been the standard store of value and protection against currency debasement for over 5,000 years. It's interesting that profligate governments always denigrate gold holding, and holding it is often banned by governments in crisis who have deceived their electorate. The words of President Woodrow Wilson after he signed the Federal Reserve Act should serve as a warning to all of us. I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government by free option, no longer a government by conviction and a vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men. Friedrich von Hayek, an eminent Austrian school economist, said, "I do not think it's an exaggeration to say that history is largely a history of inflation. Usually inflation's engineered by governments
10 seconds.
for the gain of governments.
10 seconds, Rupert.
Given the historical track record of states abusing their citizens by various forms of currency debasement, including QE, the default position should be to make it illegal unless this democratically elected House has an informed vote supporting debasement. This bill seeks to achieve this position, and I commend it to the House.
That the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. One of us has got to sit down, Rupert. I've got to do my bit. You're coming back on in a minute, don't we? So, who will prepare to bring in the bill?
Mr. Speaker, Richard Tice, Jim Allister, myself and others.
You've got to name them. You can't not name them.
It's McMurdoch.
And me.
And a one, right, OK.
Say Ed David. Put Ed David down. Put Rachel. Rachel from the Council.
Maybe Rachel Reeves, I don't know.
Can you just read the names for clarity so that Hansard's got it?
Tice, Jim Allister, James McMurdoch, Lee Anderson, and myself.
All right. It's a shambles. Absolute shambles. Rupert Lowe.
Future leader.
Quantitative easing, the Prohibition bill.
Second reading, what then?
24th of January, Speaker.
The 24th of January.